Hello, I'm having technical difficulties with my recorder. So I apologize for the delay. But here we are, week 2 in chapter 4. And this is on ethics and social responsibility. In this chapter, we'll learn how to identify common kinds of workplace deviance, describe the U.S. Sentencing Commission guidelines for organizations, and explain how they both encourage ethical behavior and punish unethical behavior by businesses. Describe what influences ethical decision making, and explain what practical steps managers can take to improve ethical decision making. And 5, explain to whom organizations are socially responsible. Explain for what organizations are socially responsible. Explain how organizations can respond to societal demands for social responsibility, and explain whether social responsibility hurts or helps an organization's economic performance. Okay, so ethics is a set of moral principles or values that defines right and wrong for a person or group. And ethical behavior is behavior that follows accepted principles of right and wrong. Okay? And then workplace deviance, unethical behavior that violates organizational norms about right and wrong. Okay, so it's not telling you what's right and wrong. It's not telling you what behavior is right or wrong. It's saying that it's a set of values or principles that define it, that people accept. Now, by people, it's people within a certain geographic area. That's a culture. Okay? So that's why what's right in one culture may not be right in another culture, and vice versa. And so it's situational. It's also based on time. What was right 100 years ago may be wrong today. What was right 20 years ago may be wrong today. So, types of workplace deviance. You have minor and serious, interpersonal, and organizational. So you have production, property, personal, and political. Those are the 4 areas that it's talking about. Okay. So U.S. Sentencing Commission guidelines for organizations covers offenses defined by federal laws, encourages companies to take proactive steps that will discourage white-collar crime, gives companies an incentive to cooperate and disclose illegal activities to federal authorities. So determining the punishment. Okay. Step 1 is computation of base fines by determining the level of offense. It varies depending on the crime, loss incurred, amount of planning that went into the crime. Step 2 is judicial determination of culpability score. Okay. And step 3 is the determination of the total fine, multiplying the base fine by the culpability score. And that's how they try to do it mathematically. Okay, so compliance program steps from the U.S. Sentencing Commission guidelines for organizations. So you have to establish standard and procedure. You have to assign an upper level manager to be in charge. You have to delegate the decision-making authority to ethical employees. Certainly say how you determine whether they're ethical or not. Encourage employees to report violations. Train employees on standards and procedures. Enforce standards consistently and fairly, and improve programs after violations. So influences on ethical decision making, the intensity of the decision, the moral development, principles of ethical decision making. And so the degree of the concern people have on an ethical issue and managerial decisions differ in their ethical intensity. So the factors that contribute to it, magnitude of the consequences, how many people were hurt, social consequences, agreement on whether behavior is good or bad, And probability of effect, chances that something will happen that results in harm to others. Temporarily immediacy, time between, temporal immediacy, time between an act and the consequence the act produces. A proximity of effect, social, psychological, cultural, or physical distance between a decision maker and those affected by his or her decision. So if you make a decision that only affects people in another country, the people that are around you may or may not have as much intensity about your decision because they can't see uh, what the consequences are. If we look at the coronavirus, the people in certain counties or certain states do not see the intensity of the disease, uh, may not think that it's actually real. And then if you look at other areas like New York City or New Orleans, Seattle, other places where they're living it day by day, um, the intensity is great, and the physical distance is very little, and of course the concentration is very high. The concentration of the effect. So here's Kohlberg's stages of moral development: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. Principles of ethical decision making, long-term interests, religious injunctions, government requirements, distributive justice, personal virtue, individual rights, utilitarian benefits. So you can use any one of those, any combination of them. You have a weighted scale. Um, Practical steps. So by using overt integrity tests or personality-based integrity tests, you can select and hire ethical employees, whether that's true or not. Well, if anyone's ever taken one of those tests, you know that they're not always accurate. Establishing a specific code of ethics, developing standards and procedures specific to the company, training employees to make ethical decisions, and then ensure managers act ethically themselves. Develop reporting systems that encourage whistleblowing. We just had the former head of the CDC testifying to the Senate today on the hearings of whistleblowing with the COVID-19 in the White House. And his reward was that he was fired for whistleblowing. So you have to do the opposite of that if you want people to actually blow the whistle on unethical things that are happening within your company. And fairly consistent punishing those that violate the code. There has to be accountability if you want ethical decisions to be made and kept. Shareholder model, organizations overriding goals should be profit maximization for the benefit of shareholders. It doesn't seem like we have that today, but that's one thing to be done. And stakeholder model is management important responsibility. Firms' long-term survival can be achieved by satisfying the interests of multiple corporate stakeholders. Of course, the stakeholders are anyone that's affected by the organization. And then we have this little model here, which is your secondary stakeholders, your primary stakeholders, the firm itself, and everybody that's inside, and government that affects it, and so on and so forth. Okay, so social responsibility of a company toward its stakeholders. Economic responsibility is to make a profit, right? That's what it's there for, is to make a profit. Legal responsibility to obey society laws, regulations. Ethical responsibility by accepted principles of right and wrong. And discretional responsibility, social role of a company fulfills beyond its economic, legal, and ethical responsibilities. It's discretionary. Okay. And so you can be reactive when something happens. You can be defensive, admit the responsibility for a problem, but does the least required to meet the societal expectations. You can be accommodative, accept responsibility, and does all that you can to solve the problem. We can be proactive so it doesn't happen at all. Okay. And the last slide, social responsibility and economic performance. No trade-offs between being socially responsible and economic performance. This relationship becomes stronger when companies have a strong reputation, and no guarantee that social responsibility companies will be profitable because many times if you're ethical and follow all the rules, it costs a lot more. For example, right now the airlines, they're filling the planes because there are no laws that say that they have to leave the middle seat empty. And so if you look at the latest videos, you'll see airplanes that are practically stuffed with people, um, where there are no empty seats. And the airlines were saying that as long as there's no regulations saying that we have to take out the middle seat or leave the middle seat empty, we're going to fill the plane because we want to maximize profits on each flight. So there's social responsibility void in social responsibility with the airlines at the moment. And that's the end of the chapter.